I'm going to make a brief video to add to some of the others I have on YouTube. Little informative information. This is on a lowrance HDS Touch 2. It's the Generation 2. And I'm just going to kind of quickly show kind of how that I set one of them up as soon as I go into the features. Let me come out of it. Your screen's going to look something pretty much like this. And you're going to hit your power button. Then you're going to come up here where it says settings and hit settings. And that's the first thing that comes up, and we're going to be setting your chart. As you can see, let me get in here on that. Your chart mode says 3D boat selection. I've got bass boat selected for that. It says range rings. I've got mine selected to on because I'm fishing in the bow of the boat, so that when I'm finding a waypoint or something out there that I want to fish, I'm able to cast right to that waypoint by knowing the distance between the range rings. I've got heading extension pressed so that it tells me which direction the bow of the boat's going. I've got course extension checked. The reason why is because I distinguish between heading extension and course extension, and that way I can go into settings and plus or minus those settings and make those more accurate. It just tells me how much on my course I'm going when I'm traveling down the lake, or my point one, how accurate it is. So that's why I've got that set. Then I've got my extension length set to 1 mile, and I've got the rest of this stuff for your pop-up information. I've got it on, and the reason I keep it on is not because of the pop-up information to know what each page is telling me. I've got it on so that if I am on my main screen and I want to delete a waypoint, I just press the waypoint and then a pop-up will pop next to it, and I can just delete it, or I can name it or edit it or do anything I want to that waypoint. So that's why I keep that one on. Keep grid lines off. I got waypoints marked because I want to be able to share through Ethernet with my Touch 12 that I have on the dash. So routes I keep off, and trails I keep off. Of course, hide chart and all that I keep off. So now we'll go over here to where it says sonar, and then sonar was network sonar. I don't want the two to network to each other, so I keep it off. Overlay down scan I keep off. Fishing mode I keep in shallow water. You can see here where you got different settings, but I keep mine in shallow water. And you got the rest of these modes don't really do you much good as far as my main application. I'm fishing on Kentucky Lake, and I do a lot of ledge fishing. Now, installation here is where you want to go and down in here and set your transducer type, and that's mine right here. This is a normal lowrance transducer that usually is the 83200 that comes with it. I marked that one for I'm fishing with an Ultrac Minn Kota trolling motor, and it's got a universal sonar built into the lower motor unit. So I check that one, and if that one usually doesn't work, you can just check a 83200 generic, and it usually works just fine. You pull that up though, and you hit save. That's pretty much. You go back into settings, open it back up again, and what I like to do then is come up to system, and here's my system. Got English for US. I got the text size to normal. Turn the beeps off. I come down here to coordination system, and normally it default through lowrance. This is usually set to degrees and minutes. I like to put mine at degree, minutes, and seconds. To me, it just seems like it's a little bit quicker refresh rate on the screen as you're running up the lake, say at high speeds. Your screen seems to refresh and update quicker that way to me than it does when it's set here to degrees and minutes. So that's where I like to keep mine. Then I got magnetic variation set to auto. I keep that on auto. You can set it manually. Now what I do is when I'm running my coordinates for heading up, I will set this to -3, or the difference in those two settings. Now you can just keep it on auto, but I can go into that here in just a few minutes on how to set it manually. Now mine's set at -3 because on my point one when you do a calibration on your 0.1 and you got it on auto, you can have a little difference in variance in it, and usually your units will try to play catch up and try to set those coordinates for you. So what I like to do is just come in here, and usually I can hit manual like that, and you can set these settings up like if your heading extension is not lined up with your course extension, those two will have a little variance in numbers based on calibration because you got it in the automatic mode. Now I like to go in and fine tune mine. Depends, what I do is I subtract the difference between those two, the heading extension and the course extension. And on this particular unit, on my Touch 12 on the dash, mine happened to be -3, and that pretty much keeps my heading extension and course extension pretty much lapped on top of each other. So that's just a little bit of a fine tune that I do. So I keep that on there, and then you come into manual like that, and then there it is, set for 3 degrees offset. And most of them by default on lowrance comes with a magnetic variation. Most of them come set on auto. So I like to put mine on -3 because what that is a different setting that I've manually set between heading extension and course extension. Now I set those on my screen as I'm fishing and running so that I can always see those two marks on there. So I can show you that here in a few minutes when I get into some of these other pages. The rest of this stuff here is pretty much, you can see where local settings, global settings, and then alarm history, and then waypoints. And you can uncheck global settings here if you want to. But I go in and manually set it at each application throughout the device instead of just one overall setting. But you can see where it says restore to default. So, and then I'll come out of that, and then I'll come over here as navigation, and I don't really set much of anything on there. I just time period I have set down here. You can see where I set it to 1 second, and then this one here is set, say auto distance and auto, and I got it set on time for logging type. The rest of these settings I don't bother with. I don't need them. And we can come on down here now. Now we got system, chart, and sonar. They're all set. So you're pretty much good now for that. So now let's go on down here and we'll go to network. Okay, now we'll come up to data sources, and you'll see up here GPS, vessel, sonar, weather, time, cabin, and unconfigured. It says I'll hit my GPS setting like this. I'll open up the data, and as you can see, everything on here shows the auto 0.1, the HDS 12 that I've got on my dash, and you can see here where the HD9T, which is this unit, and I've got this device. Now I set the 0.1 on this one that I've got mounted on the back of the boat, back at the transom, and I run the 12 with the data set to 0.1, so it would be the 12 on the dash, but on this one I'm not going to run the 0.1 on data, but I will run this one under vessel settings. So on all data, so that I'm not running the 0.1 antenna, I want to run the antenna on this 9. It's on the bow of the boat. I want to run this antenna on this Touch 9 from the built-in antenna that's up here, built into the unit itself. It's a magnetic, at the magnetic setting, and then the antenna right here is all that I need. I'm not going to run the 0.1 up here when I'm marking most of my waypoints 21 feet behind me. My boat's 21 feet long. It's an 08 Triton 20X2, but I've got the 0.1 antenna mounted back by the transom. So I'm going to run the 0.1 on the Touch 12 up on the dash, and I'm going to run this 9 on this unit. So there's where you set that. So I come down here and I make absolutely certain it's sitting here all data. I want it on local. You can see here where you can open this up and it'll says local and it says global. Well, most lowrance default is always checked local. So you want to go in here and make sure it's not setting on global, and you want to make sure it's on local like that. And pop that off, and then that way you know. See, it says all data local. You want to make sure that these are done that way. So you can open up the screen and there's where it says your scope setting is the one where you change the local and the global setting. You want it on local if you're in the United States. And I happen to be in Kentucky on Kentucky Lake, so I want to run mine on local setting. So Now you can see I've check marked this unit in the bow of the boat, touch 9, but I have not checked point 1, so I'm not going to run the data up here off the point 1, the antenna. So the point 1 antenna is not going to be running on this touch 9 at the bow of the boat. And like I said again, the reason for that is because the point 1 I'm running on the dash, because it's more accurate back there on the dash, because I'm making waypoint settings based off the point 1 antenna back on the transom, where that's where my 83200 is mounted in the hull of the boat, and it's where my side down scan transducer is mounted back at the transom of the boat. So it's be more accurate setting that way. So what I've done here is I've checked HDS 9. I make sure the setting is on local. Come back out, data sources, pop it. Now I'm going to come down here to vessel. You see where vessel settings are. I'm going to come over here, and you're going to see how I'm going to check these settings. It says heading, and I check point 1. Because what I want to do is I want to run the magnetic variance settings off the point 1 for the magnetic readings. So that I do run, and the reason why I want to run all these settings under vessel is because I want the magnet to always keep my boat position heading toward the bow of the boat. It will tell me the direction that the boat is heading, the bow of the boat. Even if I'm sitting still. If I'm moving, it will, and if I'm sitting still, it even will. And if the boat drifts backwards slightly or left to right, it'll still keep me showing the front of the boat. It'll show where the bow of the boat is heading forward. So based on that, I'll check heading, point 1. I check rate of turn, point 1. I'll check the amplitude pitch, point 1. And I roll up here and check roll, point 1. And what I do is I make sure that all of those are checked, and then I'll come over here and make sure that every one of those is under local. See, I'll check each one of them and make sure they're all popped under local. See, each one of these settings, I make sure it's set on local setting and not on global. So there's my settings. So now I've got for my heading under vessel settings, which is I'll be using my magnetic settings from point 1. I'm going to be using that to control my boat. That way my screen won't keep spinning and rotating all over the place. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put these all back where they're supposed to go. And then under vessel, now you see they're all cleaned up. Now, as far as all these settings go here, you can just pop down if you want to set your time. You see local, and you got your time. You can see that you want to make sure it's not on none of these. This is the one on the dash, which is a 12. There's a point 1. You're just trying to make sure these are all still on 9, which is this unit, the 9 touch, and you just go over here and you make sure everything C is on local. Not a big deal. You can do the same. You do the same to this one. Make sure it's on local. But that's what I do. I do everything down through here. I'll do the weather the same way, and it shows the weather. See, you got local, and there's my temperature. It's mounted on the back of the transom, but I'm using a NIMNA 2000 connection cable that runs up, and it shares from the 12 and to this touch 9 and tells me what the water temperature is back on the transom of the boat. So I come off of that, and then there they are. But I figure all these the same way. But that's pretty much right there is how you're figuring that out to get. So just to recap it real quick, you come up here where it says GPS settings, it says all data normal. You open the data up on GPS settings, you expand the GPS setting, and it says touch 9. You don't want point 1 up here because you want to use the antenna off of this touch 9 unit instead of your point 1 that's mounted in the transom of the boat. So that's the reason why that I've got it sit this way. So I touched this. Now normally if you wanted to use point 1 you'd check that, but you're going to be, my boat's 21 feet long, so I'm going to be 21 feet away from the antenna back there, so I want to have a little more accurate setting than that. So that's why I check this one and I do not check that. Now back on the 12 I would not do that. I would check point 1 right here, but all the vessel settings would still be check marked because I want to use the magnetic compass back on the point 1 and I want to be able to use the 0.1 then antenna on the 12 unit to mark all my waypoints to be more accurate. So on the 12 back there on the console, I would be marking this as 0.1 and not check marking neither one of these two here. I would check 0.1. I don't want to use the 12 antenna mounted on the console, and I wouldn't want to use this 9 antenna. I would use 0.1. So based on that, that's a little recap of how they're setting. So you would check, this is on the bow of the boat that I'm fishing with off the trolling motor. I do not want to use the 0.1 up here. So now I'm going to come back out, and there we go on that. So we can come back out of that, and then like I said, you can look over here and there's a vessel setting. Vessel setting on the unit itself, I've got set to 1 mile. And that's where I keep that, but pretty much, that's pretty much your settings. That you can see how I'm doing here. You can see the magnetic variation. That magnetic variation right there is the one I'm talking about. After you set the settings on the 12 and you calibrate your 0.1, after it's calibrated, your magnetic variation will usually be set at auto with lowrance's default. With this, I can set it to manual, and I can actually add or subtract. Now, if I added, that would be plus right there. And then I subtracted 3 degrees off of the calibration setting when I calibrated the boat. All right, so when I installed the 0.1, I had to calibrate the boat. You have to turn circles, keep it, within 1 to 3 degrees when you turn in a circle, and then you calibrate the 0.1. Well, I've done that, but then now I come in here manually and set this minus 3 degrees. And what I wanted to say about all this is, like on mine, you can see, just running back through, you can just see the headings again. But here's this setting I'm talking about: heading extension and course extension. I have them both on. That's going to give me a blue line, and it's going to give me a red line. All right, those 2 lines I've got as add-ons on my face of the GPS sonar screen as I'm running, and it will show me that difference. See, okay, so now when I'm doing that, it will tell me how close these 2 settings are together. So based on that, mine said it was 3 degrees off from the calibration. When I did the circles, they had to be between 1 and 3 degree turn radius when I calibrated the 0.1. When I calibrate that 0.1 and it's in auto, which the lowrance default setting is usually in auto, when you do that, it's going to be off a little bit. It's going to be off a few degrees somehow when you're turning your boat and you're traveling and heading and all of that. So I set the heading extension on and course extension on. I go out on the main screen, and then I will look and see what those settings are, and I will subtract or add that difference manually. You can see here where I go out and I will subtract the difference of minus 3. Then what that did, that made the heading and a course extension line up with each other. The red and blue line now will be right on top of each other, or very close. So that's the way that it works for me out here on Kentucky Lake. And I do a lot of ledge fishing out here on Kentucky Lake. But I'm running this setup. This is a Touch Gen 2, and I got a 12 Gen 2. Both have 4.5 updates on them, so they're both synchronized and running the same. I'm running Ethernet cable because I'm sharing waypoints, and I'm sharing a Navionics chip. I'm sharing that in the 12. Got a NEMA 2000 network hooked to it, and it all just works fabulous for me. So I just hope that kind of helps everybody, and you can kind of get a generalized idea of what I'm doing. You can see here where I've got depth set here, and I got water temperature set there. And then when I'm running, you can see how my settings are over here on the GPS. You can overlay these settings up here if you want. But that's the way that I'm running this on this 9 in the front. And on the 12 up there, over here, I've got heading extension and course extension numbers right there. And they'll show me the difference in them all the time. But I have this blue line course extension on the bow, but on the 12, I've got this blue line, which is you got a heading extension and a magnetic course line that I put up. It'll be one to be blue, one to be red. That red and blue line will be right on top of each other because of the minus 3 degree offset that I manually put into this thing. So it's not that real complicated, but I just decided to make this. I get a lot of guys asking me over on Kentucky Lake, how do you set up your sonars? How do you stay on your waypoints? How do you know where you're traveling? Well, they said they ran the course up, and I'm running, as you can see here, I'm running heading up. See, it comes standard default and it says north up. That's what most guys run. Well, they can't figure out then why it says north, the arrow's pointing the opposite direction, and they can't figure out why their screen's spinning and they can't stay on the waypoints. So instead of running north up, like the default usually is set from lowrance, and a lot of guys run, I'll run heading up only because I installed a 0.1. But by putting that 0.1 on this thing, it has absolutely changed the way that I can stay on a waypoint. So with the 0.1 and then the little bonus of the old track trolling motor, that I installed on here with spot lock, I am able to keep this thing right out there on those ledges, and I can fish in the wind and I can fish in the rain, and it really does a good job. So anyway, I appreciate it, guys. And one little other note that I can just make for you guys is when you shut this off, use your power button and come up here to your settings, and it says power off. Power your units off that way. That's the best advice I can give you for starting and shutting. And when you turn your units on, the units are a little slow. This is a Gen 1, so the processor is not that fast. It's just got a single stage processor in it. But the Gen 3 is supposed to have a dual, and I guess the Carbon's supposed to have a quad core in it. I'm not sure about that, so don't quote me on that. But this one's got a single stage processor in it, so it's fast, but it's not that fast. But you want to give this thing time to come on. So when you start this thing up, when you turn the unit on, you want to make sure that you see it come on in the accept page, or right down in the bottom corner down here, it'll say loading charts. You want to make sure that all that loads up before you push the accept button. Don't push the unit. Let the unit do its job that it was designed to do, and then hopefully we won't have any problems out of them. So good luck to you, and please subscribe if this has been informative and helping you and setting this unit up. And any questions you need, ask in the bottom and in the comment, and like this page, and please subscribe to it. Thank you.